Greetings, everyone. I'm going to give a lecture on chapter 1 from the Sensoy and D'Angelo text. This is not a required meeting. The class is still designed to be asynchronous, which means we don't meet at a certain time. But as I indicated before, I will hop on sometime randomly and give a live lecture that will be recorded. That way, if anybody wants to just join and be a part of it and meet me and talk to me real time, we could do that as well. So keep that in mind. This is not required. And a couple of other things I want to say as I get into this lecture. This is a sprint course. This is 7 weeks. And so please some of you will be taking this 7 weeks. Some of it will be 14 weeks. But for those that are taking the 7-week course or full semester, 16 weeks is the full semester. But for a 7-week course, it goes by fast. Make sure you get the book right away. Do the readings. We're in the beginning of the course right now, but it'll get away from you fast. You have an assignment due at the end of this week. Don't put it off. Don't procrastinate. Okay, having said that, that's all I can think of in terms of the opening thoughts. I've been enjoying the reading so far and the things that you have submitted. So I'm just excited to have you in the course and to have you as a part of this course. So chapter 1 really deals with this idea of how to approach a course like this. So let me just get into that really quickly. I don't want to hold you too long. So chapter 1, how to engage constructively in courses that take a critical social justice approach. Now, one of the items that you may see on the exam is this idea of critical. And when you are studying in an academic setting or taking college courses, especially within the discipline of social theory, social philosophy, educational research, historical research, often we will redefine terms. And what may mean something in common usage takes on a different connotation in an academic setting. It can be confusing, but it's helpful because we adopt words and then we adapt words. One example is the idea of privilege. You'll be hearing us talking about privilege, male privilege, able-bodied privilege, social class privilege, even privilege as it relates to race. And we don't mean privilege that one is born with a proverbial silver spoon in their mouth. They're privileged, they have resources, they never had to work a day in their life. That's not what we mean by privilege. So when you hear that, what we mean is unearned privileges that one gets in society, for example, for being a male. People just cater to you as a male. They assume that you know what you're talking about in many cases. So that's what we mean by privilege. Another one of those words is critical. The word critical. The word critical here has to do with a particular philosophical tradition. Now, we know critical primarily means in everyday usage when you are overly judgmental and harsh towards something. He was critical towards her driving, for example. But we don't mean critical in that sense. We mean critical around the philosophical tradition of the Frankfurt School, and they see the world as unjust. And they see education as a potential tool to try to bring equity or equality to individuals that are disadvantaged. So critical social justice approach. How to engage constructively in courses that take a critical social justice approach. So when you see critical, that's what we mean. A philosophical tradition that assumes the world is not equal, that everyone does not have the same opportunities. Like our book, is everyone really equal? One of the most important principles to understand in this class is anecdotal evidence. And that's evidence that's based on personal stories and single, isolated, or non-representative examples. So, for examples, in terms of, let's use the example of race. One might say there was an African American young man that went to my school, and we didn't have. He was the only African American that went to my school, and he always got into fights. So therefore, African Americans are violent. That's anecdotal evidence. But when we do research, we want to have a larger sample size than the one example. Okay, and then people might say, that particular individual. Another example, the African American never had any problems. In another scenario, never had any problems. Everybody liked them. Therefore, people of color don't struggle in our society. So anecdotal evidence based on personal stories. Platitude, a trite, simplistic, and meaningless statement often presented as if it were significant or original. For example, I'm not privileged at all, so therefore male privilege does not exist. Mainstream society, the dominant framework for making sense of society that's circulated. Um, and so we were talking about mainstream society, um, the dominant framework for making sense of society that's circulated across all institutions that all members of society are exposed to. So key terms continued. Peer review. So this is a term that the evaluation of scholarly work often done anonymously to ensure fairness by peers with expertise in the same field in order to maintain or enhance the excellence of the work in that field and to advance knowledge. Peer review is the gold standard for the academic world. And what I want us to understand is the material that we're reading is peer review. It's not opinion. I think the assumption when you do work or when one does work around sociology, dealing with issues of gender, race, social class, equality, equity, one assumes that it's just somebody's opinion. But this is well researched, empirical, often peer reviewed scholarship, including the Senso and D'Angelo work. And so approach it as if it is a scholarly body of work. And what I want you to do in this class is, I'm not interested in whether you agree with it or not. That would not be fair. In fact, you may not agree with the premises that the authors come up with, but I'm more concerned that you learn the material and that you understand where they're coming from, because it's helpful in this conversation about multicultural education, the role the schools play in trying to provide diverse curriculum, diverse perspectives, objective perspective that some things are factual and not informed by social or cultural interpretations, universal truth outside of any particular framework. So the authors argue that objectivity is very difficult. Many things we do is indeed informed by social and cultural interpretations. Subjective, an individual, so subjective is sort of the opposite of objective. A personal perspective, feelings, beliefs, interests, or experience as opposed to those made from a source considered independent, unbiased, universal, and objective. Often when we make statements, especially like social media kinds of debates and conversations, it's based on the idea of objectivity or subjectivity. I'm sorry, it's based on the idea of my own opinion. People put forth their own opinion as if it's fact. Okay, let me keep going here. Um, this is an example from the book, A Story, The Question of Planets. Astronomy class, the student disagrees with the professor about how many planets. The student claims logical thinking for 9 planets. The student disrespects the professor for expressing scientific facts and not just opinion. The professor tries to explain that he is not the only person in the scientific community that thinks the same thing. So it's not an opinion, it's a peer review. So there's others that subscribe to this that give more credibility to the claims. So here's some guidelines from the book. By the way, I'm doing this also because it'll be helpful in preparing you for the exam. There are 2 exams in this class. Exam 1 is on, I think, chapter 1 through 6, and then the exam 2 is 7 through 12. So it's guidelines. Strive for intellectual humility. So one of the things that will help us grow as scholars and teachers and thinkers is that we remain humble and that we are okay to say, I don't know. This whole class is not about being right or correct. That's a misunderstanding of intellectual discourse. Avoid willful ignorance. So, for example, if you know that you're not correct in something, don't dig your heels in. I don't know where we got that from anyway. People will know that their answer is not correct, but rather than admit that publicly, they'll dig their heels in, is what I call it anyway. But ways to achieve intellectual humility: understand we don't know everything and that we're lifelong learners. Be a lifelong learner, including myself, even as a professor. It's not important to me that I'm always right. That's not my goal. It's not important to me that I appear to be the smartest person in the room. That's not important. I'm trying to strive towards a higher truth and making the world a better place. But the second guideline: everyone has an opinion, but opinions are not the same as informed knowledge. I want us to walk away with that. Do your homework, regardless of what your political persuasion is or what your sociological persuasion is. Do your homework, do the readings. There's no substitute for reading on a deep level. But be willing to accept other people's opinions. Thirdly, let go of anecdotal evidence and instead examine patterns. Like at NKU, look at the kind of people that are in education classrooms, mostly women. And in the College of Education, it's not very ethnically or racially diverse. That's a pattern, that's a trend. Why? So think about constructive ways to engage the course. You won't agree with everything. And listen, this is not, if you're thinking this class is liberal indoctrination and Dr. Childs is here to persuade us to agree with him and liberal bias and all the things we hear, all the political talking points, DEI, wokeness, woke ideology, those aren't academic terms. Those are political talking points and wedges that have been formed in some think tank to get us to think a certain way. There's a third space in this classroom, and in my mind, above Republican or Democrat. There's a third space above that. That's the thinking person. That's the critical thinker. And in this way, we can see issues with both sides, but I also think beyond politics. And so this is not woke ideology. That's a misunderstanding of what we're doing. Okay. Guide 4: use your reactions as entry points for gaining deeper self-knowledge. We learn about ourselves. A course like this can trigger strong reactions, and it will. But these reactions can be constructive to applying the course concepts. Recognize how your social position informs your reaction. So the way you grew up will definitely inform your reaction. If you grew up in a home that was male dominated and the women were subjugated, that's going to influence how you view the material. If you grew up in a setting that was not very racially or ethnically diverse, that may influence how you look at the class and how you approach the class. So I'm asking us to just suspend and rethink how we do things, and how we look at things. Let me just say it like that. Your own position does not have to align with your instructors in order to consider the framework. You will not be graded down for not agreeing with the concepts. I want you to know them. So, does the teacher and the student, let me move this, sorry. Does the teacher and the student follow the 5 guidelines? Does the teacher avoid willful ignorance? Do either the teacher or the student allow the other to have an opinion? Is a strong reaction the reason for this argument in class? Does either the student or the teacher use their social standing for their argument? So we have to think about that. Follow certain guidelines, and be open-minded. You don't have to change your opinion, but just be thoughtful. These are important concepts for doing well in the class. And so, as I said, I just wanted to briefly give you some things to think about for this class. Definitely come see me if you have any questions. Or we can set up a Zoom or something like that. So continue on. Let's carry on with the work. Have a good one. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.